everybody, we are back with another one of our devotional videos. My name is Jennifer, the youth pastor at Funny Path Pentecostal Holiness Church, and this is
Marissa Chuck, and I am a second semester freshman at Emmanuel College.
Today we're going to be back with a video entitled Casting Stones. Ooh, man, those things hurt. All right, normally when one thinks of stones or rocks, our first thoughts kind of go to building stones, kind of the foundations and pillars for certain types of buildings. But you know, there are lots of ways that we kind of use stones. We might crush them up for road construction or maintenance. We might make cement with them. We actually might use them in writing utensils like chalk, bath scrubs, medicine, fertilizer, jewelry, art. The possibilities are endless for what we can do with stones. But there is something we should not do with stones.
See, there is kind of an example that we have that we're running with this time. It's kind of like, you know, when you have guests over for a meal, you know, you break out all your nicest silverware, the ones you actually have to put in the dishwasher or hand wash yourself, not the plastic white ones or like the fake silverware where it's just silver plated plastic. Yeah. You know, we use actual silverware. We use actual, like, the glass cups, you know, like the ones at your grandma's house that you weren't allowed to use as a kid because you'd probably drop them and break them. And you even use real glass plates, not the paper ones or like
not with the older children.
But you don't use the paper plates or the styrofoam. You use everything that you actually really like. But you invite them over, you cook the best meal that you can, you make all the side dishes, you have appetizers, you even make dessert.
Whoa.
That's a lot. Like I said, you use all the nice stuff in your kitchen, you set the table. I know we don't do that necessarily at my house. We just kind of, hey, does everybody have a fork? But you set the table, everybody gets their own drink in, you know, those fancy little glass cups. And yet they still find something wrong with what happened. Either everything wasn't salted the way they wanted, or it wasn't the dessert that they maybe had asked for or hoped for. You know, you didn't have diet sugar-free Coke. I'm like, it could be anything from seasoning to, it wasn't perfect the way they wanted it. But sometimes they have the goal to talk to other people about it. You know, they talk bad to maybe mutual friends that you have. They gossip about maybe to them how terrible it was. Or some people are bold enough to say it to your face.
Whoa. So despite all the effort that you've put in, somebody's still going to find fault with all of that?
Always and forever.
You know, we Christians are really bad about this. We're bad about what the title of today's devotion is, Casting Stones, about finding fault with other people, even if they're trying their absolute best. You know, it's just like we talked about all the ways that we could use stones. You know, builders are going to see them as valuable. Even the ones that might be a little jagged, may not necessarily look the best because they're looking at them in terms of function. But you know what? Sometimes, as Christians especially, we start looking through those stones and we start saying, you know, you look worthless, you look jagged, you look hideous, you are imperfect, you are rugged. And then in our effort to cast those stones aside, we end up casting them at people. We actually see people the same way that we look at some of those rocks and render them useless. We see all their imperfections. We see all the sin and all the failure. And despite these people that were made in the image of God, we start calling them by these words when they mess up, whether it's publicly or in private. And we're going to talk today about the example that we all know about a group of people that decided they were going to cast stones. In John 8, a woman that was caught in the act of adultery, so obviously evident sin that was made public, is brought before Jesus. And?
Well, Jesus did not do what they wanted.
Their suggestion
was quite literally the title of this video, to cast stones at her.
To stone her to death. Let that be the punishment for her sin. Now, we all love Jesus, but we definitely love Jesus's response here. It's kind of like when one of the kids who gets in trouble in my classroom at school tries to come and tell on another kid that's getting in trouble for the same thing, and I just sometimes ignore. I don't know that that's necessarily the best response, because then they're like, Miss Elrod, do you even hear me? Yeah, I heard you. Well, that was kind of what Jesus did, because they came and they're like, we need to cast stones. Here's the sin that she's been caught in. And Jesus ignored them. He like drew in the sand.
He's like, you without sin, not let him cast the first stone at her. He basically said, okay, whoever's perfect, step up, take your best shot.
But before he even said that, he was hoping like his silence would be enough for them to be like, oops, we probably shouldn't have asked that.
But they didn't get the memo.
So they had to relay the message, obviously, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. So basically, whoever has absolutely no fault in your heart or in your thoughts or in your behavior, you go ahead, you be the first one to throw it, and we'll see if other people follow suit. You know, it's not that the sin wasn't evidenced or clear. They had enough for conviction, basically in a court of law. But that's not the opportunities we should look for when it comes to other people. We're supposed to be loving and not judging. We're supposed to be offering healing and not more hurting, if we call ourselves Christians.
But see, that's the problem. A lot of times in the church, we do cast stones at people, whether intentional or not. And I think sometimes, you know, like, we're gossiping about people, or, you know, we're bold enough to be like those dinner guests and talk to you about yourself to your face. You know, we're casting stones at you because a lot of times when we're talking bad about other people and we're looking and we're saying, I would not have done that. Well, you might have not done that, but I'm sure there was a time that you would have before
Or did that yourself.
Or you did something worse. But let's remember, sin has no measure. So really that puts you and that person as equals.
And sometimes we kind of do it on purpose. Not necessarily because we want their sin to necessarily be made public, but maybe we do. Maybe we do it out of jealousy. Maybe we do it to elevate ourselves, to make ourselves feel better.
Kind of like the I'm better than that person.
Not realizing how much we're tearing down another believer. We're basically kicking them when they're already down. They know they're struggling. And so it's not necessarily certainly a good way for you to point it out in the manner that she does. Now,
kind of like that quote where it says the only time you should ever look down on someone is when you're helping them up.
Helping them up, absolutely. Now, Jesus kind of reminded those who surrounded the woman of basically the similar message is what he was telling them about, that Matthew 7 had talked about, and it was actually a familiar proverb. This is not something that Jesus just stated to them. It was something that was actually passed around. The Jews and the rabbis actually listened and repeated and said this proverb, but they didn't necessarily practice it. We know that by how the Pharisees and the Sadducees treated both Jesus and believers at that time. He cautioned them about calling out that speck, that one little particle of dust in their neighbor's eye, while blatantly ignoring the plank that they had sticking out of theirs that they're walking around with.
Ignorance of one's imperfections. And how many times do we do that? Or we just choose to lie about it and say, well, I don't see anything. Yeah, there's a plank stuck in your eye. Of course you're not going to see anything. But we're so quick to say, well, I don't have anything stuck in my eye. Number one, it's a plank. You can't see out of it. Of course you're not going to see it. Number two, of course you're going to sit there and say you don't have anything because you want to believe that, you know, you're doing great and you don't really have anything to improve upon, but there's always something you can improve upon. And there's always, yes, there is always something somebody else can improve upon, but we're not supposed to call out the little things when we have a giant plank sticking out of our own eye.
It's like sitting there and carefully scrutinizing every single move, action, or thought that someone else has while you're not even glancing at the condition of your heart. You won't even look down and see what's going on with your own self, but you're going to sit there and call out everything else that other people are doing.
Not only does that make you look really like a fool and it looks really self-centered, but that also really hurts the other person and it does not build them up like we're supposed to be doing.
But you know, it's also got to hurt Jesus. Because he gave us this example to follow, basically told us to do as he would do, to love as he would love. And then when he rescued you when you need rescuing, you're not willing to step in and rescue somebody else. You know, who qualifies us to be a judge? Just to be a judge in America, you have to go through all kind of schooling and all kind political realms and climb up to that level. Who qualifies us to be the judge of another person? Our own sins, no matter how few or seemingly insignificant, still disqualify us as judges of other people's sins. You know, the only way that we could kind of even consider judging other people is if we could do it in love.
But see, that's another one of the commandments that we actually have. It's found in Mark 12:31. We're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. Now, we weren't told what kind of neighbor we were supposed to love. He didn't tell us, you're supposed to love a neighbor that always keeps their lawn cut. You're supposed to love a neighbor that always keeps their house painted nice. You're supposed to love a neighbor that always has a clean vehicle. You're supposed to love a neighbor that, always lets the kids play in from every other house in their yard.
And we could extend that neighbors into family and friends, anybody you surround yourself with.
Right.
You don't get a choice.
But he said, no, you can love a neighbor that doesn't have enough food in their pantry. You love the neighbor that doesn't always have the best clothes to wear. You love the neighbor who might live in kind of a shack compared to your house. You love the neighbor that rides a bicycle to work instead of driving in your Cadillac. You love the neighbor that may be less fortunate than you. You love your neighbor. You don't love your neighbor based on what they have or what they look like or who they are. You just love your neighbor. Whether they are saved or whether they're not. Whether they are in the same denomination as you or not. Whether they're the same religion as you or not.
Now, truth be told, sometimes those neighbors, those family, those friends, they are living in blatant sin. They're not even trying to hide it or to cover it up. We just see it. So how do we as Christians respond to that without casting stones? First thing, we have to be concerned with ourselves first. Because if you're not checking the condition of your heart and where you're supposed to be and living the way you're supposed to be so that you can edify another person, so that you can encourage, so that you can love, then you are not qualified to bring any form of correction. That's a oof, not a oof. All right.
Yeah.
But the second one is how we do confront. If we are at that place that we are trying to live right and we do know that we need to sit this brother or sister down in love, in Christ, and kind of point out these faults or discuss these faults, how do we as Christians do that?
Well, we definitely don't look down our nose at them.
And we don't try to call public attention to their sin. We have to be willing to truly offer help and love.
Or help through love.
I like that even better. Offer help through love, not judgment. God does not rule with an iron fist of judgment, an iron fist of love. We remember his correction comes because he loves us. That's the way he tells us to train up our own children. Train them up, don't withhold correction, but let it come through love. And that last part, this is where it gets us every time. We walk as Jesus would have walked.
There's actually a good quote that actually goes with that. It says, how we walk with the broken speaks louder than how we sit with the great.
And he would show love and mercy and compassion. Now, he wouldn't show necessarily tolerance. He wouldn't tell them that their sin is okay.
Because unconditional love does not mean unconditional approval or acceptance.
But I guarantee the woman that he picked up after everybody had walked away with the stones saw not only love, but how she should be living out her own life that day. I truly feel like she felt the forgiveness and love that she saw in the Savior's eyes as he picked her up from her crumbled state and said, nobody's going to hit you with a stone today, not even me. I'm here to offer love and forgiveness. That's the way that we're supposed to treat other people when they're down. We've got this quote also that says, I'm afraid that too often we are the stone throwers instead of the grace givers. We need to be a church that rises up to be a grace giver as opposed to a stone thrower. Will you close us in a word of prayer?
Dear Lord, thank you for this day and thank you for the opportunity to bring this word. God, we just pray that each and every one of us would have a heart that looks more like yours, have a heart that looks like love and grace and forgiveness instead of one that seeks to publicize the sin or the mess ups or the imperfection of others. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, keep an eye out for regular devotional videos and posts on Facebook. Bye.